government is a military government which will rule with advice from certain eminent civilians in the country. I would like to emphasize immediately that this coup was not initiated by the armed forces merely to satisfy our selfish ends.
And I said, this is man's inhumanity to man. So to me, because you are talking to me, that was a great justification for the coup of 1972.
That was going to be his last meal. I would have prepared one of his favorite food, which is roasted mashed cocoyam with peanut or granite mixed with red palm oil.
Last word, Father, take this ring, pray for me that God may accept me as I am. This was his last word.
The military was his hidden passion, and I think he got it. You see, the philosophers have saying that there is nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. I think the time has come for the world to know the real General Acheampong.
Acheampong began his military journey at the recruitment barracks in Kumasi in 1953. After enlisting to the Gold Coast Army, he was yet to break the news to the one person he was passionate about outside his own family, his father. And so after 2 weeks, he sought permission to be absent so he could visit his father at Hwidim. Excited about his enlistment, this joy was soon to end, because his father once swore never to allow any of his children to go into the army.
Interestingly, our research found that the father had a phobia for the military service because of the experiences of the father's father, who fought in the Asante British War of the 1890s. So he swore that never would any of his children become a soldier. But unfortunately, it seems like the father did not share this hidden phobia for the military with Acheampong. So it was after Acheampong had enlisted that he came back to inform the father, hey, Dad, I'm not a soldier man, I've been accepted into the army in Kumasi. Then the father realized that he made a big mistake by not warning the son. But you see, it was too late.
When Acheampong broke the news to him, his father was highly disappointed that his son was a soldier. To him, military service was equated to war fighting and death. Further, he believed he had spent so much on his education and therefore thought he would have gone for an office job instead of the military. Acheampong was baffled by his father's extreme displeasure for the military service. The more he thought of it, the more depressed he became. He loved his father dearly, but he will make amends.
And as again we found out, Acheampong was able to get one of his trainers to come with him to plead with the father to allow him to stay in the military, and that's what really saved the situation.
James Osei Kutu finally accepted Acheampong's choice. In 1957, the Gold Coast Regiment and other units of the armed forces were withdrawn from the Royal West African Frontier Force, and with the country's name change, the regiment was renamed the Ghana Regiment. The Ghana Army in 1957 consisted of a brigade group of 3 infantry battalions, a field battery, and a field engineer squadron, a recruit training center, and supporting services. Ignatius Kutu Acheampong successfully completed the basic military training at the barracks in Kumasi. He was posted to the barracks in Tamale and later to Accra, where, with his educational background, he was placed to teach at the Burma Camp Primary School. A man who valued education continuously pursued his dream. So at night and weekend, he was always studying for the senior high school certification, the General Certificate of Education Advanced Level. He passed at the end. Meanwhile, he rose through the ranks from Lance Corporal in 1955 to Corporal in August following year. He was promoted to Second Lieutenant in May 1957. In 1958, 5 years after his enlistment and a year after the nation's independence, he undertook officer training course at Special Training School, Rose, at Teshi in Accra. This was to prepare him for advanced military studies. The Roast was established in 1953, the very year Acheampong enlisted in the army. The British set up this special school to provide a 6-month preparatory training for selected cadets from their West African colonies.
It was a training ground for those who were groomed to be officers. You see, in the 50s, we didn't have the Ghana Academy. So if you wanted to become an officer, you were selected from amongst the ranks to go to Rose to be trained, to become a junior officer, from where you can then proceed to go to India or England for further training. So Acheampong enlisted in the Roast, I think 1959, and that's how he began his officer training program in the armed forces until he really became the head of state.
After enrolling in March 1958, Acheampong completed the 6-month training later in September and was commissioned as lieutenant in November the same year with identification number GH-77. The number confirmed him as the 77th officer to be enrolled in the Ghana Army. There were 17 cadets in this group, which was designated as Course 10. Ghanaian cadets in this course included J.A. Kabori, C.R. Techi Mason, Emmanuel A. Eskin, Parker S.K. Yami, El Kweku, and George Darkon. The other cadets were from other West African countries, and among the 7 or so Nigerians was Olusegun Obasanjo, who will become the future head of state of Nigeria.
Yes, Obasanjo, Kabori, General Eskin, and there were about 8 of them who were selected after their Roast training to go to England to have their officers training the second phase. See, at that time, after training 3 months or 6 months at the Roast, then you go for further training to become full lieutenant. So this was his May 1959.
Interestingly, the commemorative board on the walls of the office of the commandant of the Ghana Military Academy lists 16 cadets of Course 10 with the name of Ignatius Kutu Acheampong Mason. Meanwhile, through the findings of Professor Bafwa Jimendua, author of the book Life and Times of Ghana's Head of State, he revealed that in an interview with the late General Emmanuel Eskin, he confirmed he was in the same course with Acheampong.
Interestingly, as you said, Acheampong's name is not listed on the board at the Military Academy's Commandant's office, where all officers trained have been listed. And apparently, Acheampong and another person called Hadash, I think they had a problem. The problem, I'm not sure precisely what it was, but they were, I think, pinned down to be dismissed a few months to completing the program at Rust. And from what I discovered, there was an intervention by the then Prime Minister, Kwame Nkrumah, who was looking forward for Ghana's Republic in 1960 for him to become president. He was very anxious to have Ghanaians as senior officers of the military. So to dismiss 2 of them who are about to finish their training was unacceptable to Nkrumah. So I think the intervention of Nkrumah at the time is again what saved Acheampong from being dismissed from the Roast. Because if he had been dismissed, then we would have lost the whole career path in the armed forces.
Soon after graduating from Roast, Acheampong and his compatriots left for the UK for additional training at the Mons Officer Cadet Training School at Aldershot. At Aldershot, Acheampong met with Obasanjo again and cemented a friendship with his future Nigerian leader. To run off his training at Aldershot, Acheampong was put on a field observation contingent attached to a British battalion in the Rhine-Wuppertal, West Germany. The whole group that went to Aldershot returned to Ghana together. However, Acheampong's friendship with Teaching Mason was about to be deepened like never before. The two friends will become brothers after an inspirational event. In those days, it was expected that a person returning from home from studies abroad will be met on arrival by the mother, who will give a boiled egg as a sign of gratitude to God for safe return. In Acheampong's case, he had no mother to perform this traditional rite for him, having lost her as a child. So, as the plane was about to land, mixed emotions and memory of sadness swelled up in him. On one hand, he was very excited that he was coming home. On the other hand, he was sad that all his mates would be met by their mothers with eggs except him. He then decided, therefore, to stay behind, so he would join the last passengers to avoid embarrassment of being seen without his mother to give him an egg. Getting on the plane and looking for a way to get out of sight quietly, he was surprised to find Teaching Mason's mother, Mamiesi, waiting for him with an egg, an event that will inspire him for the rest of his life.
I think traditionally there's this tradition that whenever your loved one traveled overseas and returns safely back, they gave them an egg at their mouth to symbolize, thanking God for bringing them back safely. And I think when my father went to Aldershot with 8 selected cadets, including Colonel Teaching Mason, so the expectation was that when they arrived back at the airport, their mothers would come and meet them. But my father lost his mother when he was very young, I think about 4 or 5 or thereabouts. So I think he was very mindful that it would be a bit of an embarrassing moment with everybody's mother coming to meet them at the airport and him alone. So he deliberately stayed behind, in the aircraft, fidgeting and making sure everyone had left, and in the hope that he can quietly sneak away. But as soon as he got down, he saw Colonel Teaching Mason and her mother, and his mother, Colonel Teaching Mason's mother, Mamiesi, Mamiesi holding 2 eggs, waiting for my father, and she used one for my father's mouth and one to Colonel Teaching Mason, saying they're both her kids. So that was quite a moment that really touched them.
From that day, Teaching Mason became his brother for life. This event occurred in the late 1959. As expected of all newly commissioned officers, he was to experience men's life by living in Accra for some time, before being posted to the 1st Infantry Brigade in Takoradi to become one of the pioneering senior officers of Ghana Armed Forces. Acheampong's assignment with the battalion in Takoradi was short-lived. As it is expected of soldiers, he was selected the following year in 1960 to join the 1st Ghanaian contingent of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Belgium, Congo, renamed Congo-Kinshasa, later Zaire, and presently Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. His selection gave him the unique opportunity as a young officer to test his military and leadership skills. The Congo crisis broke out in July 1960. Barely a month after the country gained independence, the war intensified for 5 years before ending in November 1965. In recognition for their efforts in peacekeeping missions, some soldiers were honored and others received high commendations. Among them was Captain Kutu Acheampong, who served as the regimental signal officer for the 2nd Infantry Battalion. His feat in Congo was described as exemplary and even legendary by some of his fellow soldiers in the field. One of them, Charles Teaching Mason, recalled a mystifying incident which reinforced Acheampong's well-known preponderance for peaceful resolution of conflict and aversion to violence and blood.
He, he was commanding a platoon. A platoon is just about 8 soldiers going on a patrol. And in the Congo, the civil war during the 60s, And I think somehow they found themselves surrounded by the Kalangis, who were the Congolese military, we call them bandits. And somehow, through his own charm and the way he has this power of persuasion, he got their leader to engage him in conversation, following which they decided to surrender to him. So with his 8 men, he was able to lead 200 Kalangis to the camp where they were disarmed and were properly treated as captives. So Acheampong's ability to engage and convince was well known amongst his peers.
It is an undisputed fact Acheampong was a skilled leader, and that his capacity for leadership and negotiation in saving the lives of his troops unparalleled. As much as he was doing extremely well on his mission outside Ghana, back home things were not going all well with his own family. Because of his frequent travels, this, however, took a heavy toll on his young family each time he traveled. Comfort Adjoasa had to take the children back to Acheampong. In the process, Acheampong and Comfort drifted apart. Finally, after his return to Ghana in November 1962 from his second assignment with the United Nations, he and Comfort reached a mutual agreement and they divorced. After a period, Acheampong found and dated the beautiful Faustina Akwesi-Chuma Abuaje from Isuta Kwaman in the Ashanti region. The pretty-looking nurse worked at Kulebu Teaching Hospital. She was a beauty queen who won the 1958 Ghana Nursing Beauty Contest. In April 1963, the two married. With her, she had Anthony and Isaac. For the next several years, Acheampong will be assigned important command duties. As part of his future duties, he will undertake a number of advanced military officers' courses. One of such courses took him to the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, USA. The state of Kansas is ranked 7th among the states of America for total agricultural production. His stay in the state of Kansas will later make an indelible impression on him, which will significantly influence a future national policy decision.
Because I think Acheampong was very much impressed with what he saw. Kansas, if he makes a flat land from one end to the other, is 500 miles. And for Leavenworth, where he did his further military training, is right at the center of this state of Kansas. And I think he kept asking himself, from the notes that I reviewed for this book, how can a few people feed the whole nation and even export maize? He was talking about the Americans. So the whole idea of people being able to produce, to feed themselves, was what really impressed him. So when he became head of state, it wasn't surprising that his emphasis on agriculture, and particularly his Operation Feed Yourself program, which was to boost agricultural production for self-sufficiency, became his mantra. And I think, looking at it, he was inspired by his experiences.
When he fought February 1966, Nkrumah's government was overthrown by the National Liberation Council (NLC). Although Acheampong was not part of the coup plotters, but he was appointed by the new regime to head the Western Regional Committee of Administration. For Acheampong, heading the Western Regional Administration was an opportunity to cut his teeth as a protocol administrator, and he developed a taste for national politics. It is no doubt Acheampong was a special talent. He was called to a foreboding duty in faraway Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. He was appointed to a panel of military judges constituted by the Commonwealth to try mutinies on the island. In preparing for the assignment, he undertook research to learn more about the people and places he was to serve. In doing so, he discovered a piece of history that gained his attention.
In fact, recently I've been read on the website that some research has traced the connection between Asantes and people in the Caribbean. Acheampong apparently is a corruption of the word Acheampong, suggesting that perhaps some of his ancestry were sent to the Caribbean through the slave trade. And these guys became great warriors. They fought and warded off the British and the Spanish for them to create their own enclave of freedom in the Caribbean. And that was another interesting finding. And I think that goes to confirm Acheampong's heritage as being warriors and that kind of stuff. I'm just making that connection that for me it was amazing that he could discover that his name is even used in the Caribbean today.
Among the 20 military officers drawn from a number of Commonwealth countries to constitute the tribunal were Colonel Yakubu Danjuma of Nigeria and Lieutenant Ignatius Kutu Acheampong from Ghana. The 5-month-long trial ended in March 1971 without bloodshed, even though most rebels were guilty.
Of the trial in Trinidad and Tobago, for the death sentence, you have to have unanimity among the panel. And Acheampong was a lone voter against imposing the death penalty. As a result, no one was executed. There were 8 soldiers who were on trial. And in fact, one of them rose to become one of the prominent politicians later in the country. And again, it shows how Acheampong, in all cases, did not want to see anybody hurt, killed. And again, as I say, it's one of the fascinating aspects of his personality. A soldier who never wanted to see blood. That's very interesting.
Interestingly, the presence of the West Africans on the tribunal was odd. Yakubu Danjuma, who chaired the tribunal, had earlier been implicated in a coup. Acheampong will succeed in a bloodless coup a year later.
It was mere coincidence. Acheampong was selected. That was after the NLC handed over to the Busia regime to go and sit on this military tribunal in the Trinidad and Tobago. And Danjuma was also selected by the Commonwealth through, of course, the government of Nigeria at the time. And I think the Nigerian government perhaps did not believe that he was fully implicated in the attempted coup in Nigeria. But over there, it was interesting that on that panel, here was one colonel from Nigeria who had attempted, so to speak, to organize a coup against his government. And here was a lieutenant colonel from Ghana who has never attempted a coup, but then a year later successfully undertook a coup d'etat in the country. So that coincidence was again very interesting, knowing where they were coming from, and the fact that both were associated previously and then later with a coup d'etat.
And so he had a good taste of what it is to be a boss. And that really got into him. He was very conscious of that. And then whilst he was doing that job, after that job, he was picked with 1 or 2 other officers, and they were sent to Jamaica by the Ghana government to go and help to make investigations into a military mutiny in Jamaica. It was Banasco who was...
Trinidad and Tobago.
Trinidad and Tobago, you're right. And so when he went and came back, all these things got into him, and he felt that he had something to offer. He was somebody to reckon with. These things got into him. There's no doubt about it. I know them. So when he made this coup, I think he thought he had something to offer. But I think that he allowed his alliance, his connection with his close friends to affect him. It affected his way of doing things. Otherwise, I don't think Acheampong was a very bad guy.
After his 5-month military tribunal, Lieutenant Ignatius Kutu Acheampong returned to Ghana in March 1971. He was appointed the commander of the Takoradi-based 1st Infantry Battalion, IBN, in the Western region. 23 months after the military withdrew for the national political space, hopes were high for the nation to sustain the new democratic era under Kofi Abrefa-Buzia's Progress Party government. Although military intelligence stayed alert and monitored a few distrustful characters, the soldiers were in the main under no serious cloud of doubt about derailing the Second Republic as it happened to the First Republic under President Kwame Nkrumah. However, all was not well with the nation as the economy was in dire straits, a fall in the global market price of cocoa. The mainstay of the economy hit the country to gravely dislocate the national budget. Buzia's government inherited a dying economy and therefore had a task of arresting the situation by introducing some harsh economic measures. The first measure was to ensure the successful implementation of the government agenda by reorganizing the civil service in its own image to take full control of the state machinery. The Prime Minister's confidence in the civil service was low. He did not believe people in high strategic public positions will be loyal to carry out his policies. Hundreds were laid off in what became known as Apollo 587.
Apollo 587 was a decision or policy of the Buzia government to dismiss a certain number of civil servants when he became Prime Minister. And I think it affected, proportionally speaking, it affected more of every brethren than others, only because they were more dominant in the public service. And of course, it became one of the sore points in Ghanaian politics because the others didn't take it kindly, and I think it was part of the reason there were so many coup plots against Buzia by soldiers from that region.
Although the retrenchment exercise did not target any particular ethnic group, but overall, the Ewe group were affected most. This made people to attribute it to the 1969 elections where Buzia's party did not win a single seat in Volta region. Another policy that infuriated some Ghanaians and some African countries was the policy of dialogue with apartheid South Africa.
His approach to solving the apartheid problem was very different, in a way very conservative. Whilst the Organization of African Unity at the time, OAU, had voted that we should place sanctions and cut off all linkages or relations with the South Africans, Buzia decided instead to embark on what he called the policy of dialogue. Because he believed that to solve a problem, you have to talk about it. So in that respect, there was some sense in that. But if you look at the overall sentiments of Africa at the time, he became the odd person to be promoting that kind of policy. That's why in African politics, I think Ghana registered a very low point.
Aside the many political concerns, the government had a heavy debt of about $300 million at the time. The economy was sinking too fast. In the midst of economic meltdown, Prime Minister Kofi Abrefa-Buzia's health was failing as well. Shortly after his radio and television address on the economy on 31st December 1971, Kofi Abrefa-Buzia embarked on what would be his final trip as a Prime Minister to England for medical attention. Although there are many schools of thought regarding what really happened before the 1972 coup, some believe the coup was inevitable. One of such is a former intelligence operative officer who spoke off camera. According to him, there was a call for a bloody coup by a particular group within the army. Upon hearing this intelligence, Acheampong decided to step in to avoid what would have been a bloodbath.
If you trace Acheampong's background, his history to his infancy, till the day he was executed by his own military, it's clear that he was a man who didn't want to see violence, who didn't want to see blood. There were many opportunities for him as head of state to have executed some soldiers who attempted to assassinate him, but none was executed. At best, he would imprison you for a couple of years and release you. And if you recall in the book, there was an exchange between him and his spiritual director, where he said, look, hopefully I can release them to become useful citizens again. And the idea of not wanting blood, not wanting to see anybody killed or harmed, runs through his life. That's why it's so tragic that in the end, someone who didn't want to see the spilling of blood was himself killed with his blood spilled all over through bullets. So it's a very interesting irony in life that I found.
Finally, on 13th January 1972, barely a month after the unprecedented devaluation of the city in a tactical move, Acheampong took over the reins of power through bloodless coup.
Yeah, because you see, when a Free First government was leaving office, we understand, and this has been confirmed by many sources, that Free First recommended Acheampong to Buzia's government, that he's a good guy who can protect him. So he became like one of the boys as a soldier, but he was accepted as one of the boys. So nobody ever thought he would be the one to plan a coup against the government. And he related very well with them. As I again indicated in the book, even a few days before the coup, he played tennis with the chief of military intelligence, who never knew that his playing mate was in fact harboring this plot in his head. They played nicely. So, and of course, a day before the coup, he was then the commander of the Southern Brigade, and he was able to change the guards at the broadcasting at the Prime Minister's office and the President's office and all, which was detected by the intelligence at the time. And my own old good friend, Professor Fusuama, was head of the special branch, which was then the intelligence branch of the Ghana police. And they felt that something was wrong. They called him, and he said, look, no, nothing is wrong. I'm just trying to beef up security. Because at that time, you know, the Prime Minister had left for London for medical treatment. He said, there's nothing. I'm just trying to make sure there's tighter security, not knowing that the next day he was really going to overthrow them. Another fascinating story.
The mood of the country was such that, you know, the Busia government, I'll just give you one. Busia government came with a decision of aliens from lands order. And that aliens have taken over the retail system in this country. And therefore, they must go. At that time, one day, I was sitting at, they used to call the place Continental Hotel. I don't know the name for it now. Something else. And I was standing there, and the vehicle was going back to Nigeria. And it was about 3-story full. The people, the way it was loaded, and they were sitting at the top there. I cried. Because, what if this vehicle was going and the driver had to, all of a sudden, all these people would come down and they would be dead. That's number one. Number two, most of them were born in Ghana. Not even Gokus. Their great-grandparents were born in Gokus. Who are they going to see in Nigeria? Nobody. I cried. And I said, this is man's inhumanity to man. So to me, because you are talking to me, that was a great justification for the coup of 1972. Now, what a lot of people didn't know was that the original date for the coup was the 15th of January. But it leaked. The intelligence system got to know about it. Now, if you got to know about the people planning the coup, won't you find out who were planning the coup? And in the investigations, they realized that the man who would be in the position to foil the coup was the man who was planning the coup. Therefore, there was nothing, and they didn't know how widespread it was. And so, they had to, like the girl says, when you see, if you are in the sea, you are swimming, and the wave, a big wave is coming, what you do is, you go under. So that you are not swept away by the wind. That is why we had a bloodless coup d'etat in 1972.
Through the struggles, pain, and perseverance, Lieutenant Colonel Ignatius Kutu Acheampong was now the 6th head of state of the Republic of Ghana. He had a good heart, but at the end, his kindness will also be his doom.
The National Redemption Council has therefore decided to place the economy of Ghana on a war footing. We are soldiers. We know one way of dealing with crisis situations, and that is action.
Let me say that he was the only head of state who came to work in a 504. 504. The lead car will be 504. Command car will be 504. The backup car will be 504. They will stream through the castle almost exactly at 9 o'clock every morning. He would go to them. He would expect soon thereafter the press cuttings from my office.
Nobody has ever done anything like that before. Up to today, nobody has succeeded in doing what he did. Because Ghana exported food for the first time in thousands of tons. And we have never exported food since then. You understand? Industry. What didn't we manufacture in Ghana? I mean, there was Akasanwa TV, there was Sanyo TV, we had Duoplan buses, Willow buses, cars, we manufactured Mazda, Nissan. I mean, what did we produce in Ghana? I mean, everything was produced in Ghana. Everything was produced.